Imagine being rushed into a hospital dying, and the doctors refuse to save you. Not because they couldn't, but because they know exactly who you are. This was the case for Kang Min-jae. The night he almost died, it wasn't the bullets that nearly killed him. It was the silence, the total and absolute abandonment. 2 gunshots echoed loudly, followed by a black SUV with a shattered rear window skidding into the emergency bay of Yonsei Central Hospital at 11:47 p.m. 3 men dragged a fourth from the back seat. He wore an expensive charcoal suit soaked dark with blood. His one arm scraped the wet concrete as rain hammered the ground. The city somewhere above was indifferent and lit. They dropped him on a gurney just inside the doors. One of the men leaned close to the nearest nurse and spoke without raising his voice. "You didn't see us," he said. Then they walked back into the rain and were gone. Kang Min-jae, 35 years old, who was feared across 3 provinces, lay under the fluorescent lights with 2 bullets in him. At first the nurses rushed towards him as par protocol. The monitors confirmed what the eye could see. The numbers dropped in the slow, indifferent way of someone running out of time. But then charge nurse Suni paused and stepped back from the gurney. Her hands, which had reached for his wrist on instinct, had stopped as well, because she had seen the ring on his right hand. Black iron. Redstone. A symbol carved into its face that every person in that city knew better than to touch. The crest of the J1 syndicate. Nobody touched him. Suni called Dr. Han Sung-woo. He arrived in 4 minutes, looked at the ring, and called Director Park before he examined anything. Park arrived with pressed clothes and wire-rimmed glasses and the particular stillness of a man who had already decided what he intended to do before he walked through the door. He stood over the patient for a long moment, said nothing. Then he looked at Han. "Document him as unidentified," Park said quietly. "We are at full capacity tonight." "Sir," Suni started. "We are at full capacity," Park repeated. His voice didn't sound angry and somehow that made it worse. He turned to leave. Han followed, and the bay went still. What nobody in that corridor knew, what Park had carried alone for 6 years like a stone in his chest, was that this was not about money. It was not about fear. 6 years ago, a man connected to the J1 syndicate had driven drunk through a crossing in Mapogu on a Tuesday afternoon and killed Park's daughter. She was 8 years old. She had been carrying a plastic bag of tangerines home from the market. The case went nowhere. The driver had connections. The file was reassigned then closed. Park had waited 6 years for something that looked like justice. When the offer came asking him to step aside, let the patient die, ask no questions asked, he had said yes before the sentence was finished. He was not a corrupt man in the simple sense. He was a grieving man who had made a monstrous choice, and he had been living inside it ever since. After he left, nobody touched the man on the gurney. Nobody called any other surgeon. Nobody did anything except watch the monitor and pretend everything was okay. If this story already has your attention, hit subscribe and tell us where you are watching from. You don't want to miss what happens next. Dr. Adah Okoye stepped off the elevator at 12:03 a.m. running slightly late. Her braids pinned back in a clip she'd shoved in somewhere between her apartment and the parking lot, thermos in one hand, badge in the other. She was 30 years old and 3 weeks from losing her job. Not because she was incompetent, but because 6 weeks ago she had filed a formal complaint against Dr. Choi, a senior surgeon, and department favorite for a negligence incident that had cost a patient 2 fingers on his left hand. The hospital had found a technical error in her contract renewal paperwork. Procedural, they'd said. Nothing personal. She knew what it was. She had spent 3 weeks deciding how she wanted to spend her last weeks here. Whether to go quietly or go honestly. She had not yet decided when she stepped off that elevator and saw the trauma bay. A man on a gurney. Monitors descending. Nurses standing still with their hands at their sides. She stopped. What is going on? Why is nobody doing anything? She asked, looking around briefly. Nobody answered. She walked closer, pulled on gloves and checked the monitor. Something behind her eyes sharpened. It was not panic, something older than panic that came from years of training, telling the body to move before the mind had finished thinking. His pressure is 65/38, she said. Someone talk to me. What happened? Dr. Okoye. Suni stepped forward. Her voice was careful and measured. You just started your shift. There's been a situation. I think you need to speak to Dr. Han before you touch anything. Adah looked at her, looked at the patient and looked back. What kind of situation? She said slowly. Makes a doctor stand in front of a dying man and do nothing? Silence. Han arrived looking like a man who had hoped very specifically that she wouldn't be here tonight. For once, just do what you're told and step away from the patient. He stood in the entrance of the bay, arms crossed, and said, On what grounds? Adah asked. On the grounds that I'm the senior attending and I'm telling you to. That's not a medical reason, Dr. Han. His jaw tightened. He dropped his voice and stepped closer. Do you know who this man is? That's Kong Min-jae. Do you have any idea what happens if this hospital gets involved in whatever happened to him tonight? There are people, Adah, people who will. He stopped. Pressed his lips together. He couldn't finish it. Adah looked at him for a long moment. At the fear he was trying to organize into authority. I took an oath. We all did, she said simply. I assume you still remember yours. He left. Director Park came back minutes later, stood in the doorway with his glasses and his pressed collar. Adah, this is a direct order from above, step away from the patient, he said politely and carefully. Put that instruction in writing for me, she replied, without looking up from the patient. If this man dies and anyone asks about tonight, I want it documented exactly whose decision that was. Park opened his mouth, closed it and left. Adah looked around the bay. Anyone who doesn't want to be here can leave now. I won't judge you, she said. The nurses who remained looked at each other. Then Suni turned and began pulling supplies. The junior nurse followed. And the bay, quietly, without announcement, came alive. Adah, going against her superiors, was not bravery in the simple sense. It was something more complicated and more honest than bravery. She was already losing this job. She had known about it for 3 weeks. If she was going to lose everything anyway, she was going to lose it on her own terms, doing the thing she came here to do for whoever needed it done. 2 gunshot wounds, Adah said, her voice low and focused. Left shoulder, lateral abdomen. Abdomen is the priority. Large bore IVs, both arms wide open. O-negative blood until we have a type. I need a fast exam. Let's see what's happening in that belly. The junior nurse was setting up the ultrasound when she asked, barely above a whisper. Dr. Okoye, aren't you scared? Adah didn't stop moving, but the deep breath she took was audible. Of course I am, she said. But fear is not a reason to stop. The fast exam took 4 minutes. It showed what she already suspected. Fluid in the abdominal cavity. Blood. He was bleeding internally and had been for some time. He needed an operating room, not in an hour, not in 30 minutes now. She asked for the on-call surgical team and was told Dr. Han was on call. Gone. Dr. Kwan was in or 2 with a ruptured appendix. Minimum 1 hour. 1 hour. Adah stood very still for a moment. For seconds, maybe 5. Then she looked at Suni. Get her 3 prepped, she said. I'll do the surgery. But you're an emergency physician, Suni began to say. I did 2 years of general surgery before emergency medicine. I've performed abdominal explorations. He doesn't have an hour. She looked around the bay. Anyone who doesn't want to be in that or can leave now. I mean it. No judgment. 3 people stayed. It was enough. Or 3 was cold and quiet and surgical bright at 12:41 a.m. Adah worked the way she always worked. Clean, precise, narrating softly to herself because she had learned years ago that speaking kept her hands honest. The abdominal bleed was serious. The bullet had nicked the mesenteric artery, and the artery was not cooperating. She worked around it, through it, talking it through. There you are, she murmured. You're not as bad as you wanted me to think. Suni passed instruments without being asked. The older nurse monitored vitals and called them out steadily. Pressure 68/38. Keep the fluid going. 40 minutes in, the bleed was controlled. The pressure began slowly to climb. 72/44. Adah exhaled through her nose. Good. It was in the 3rd hour that she paused. She leaned in, used a probe carefully, gently, the way you handle something you don't want to disturb before you understand it. Then she straightened slightly. Suni, come look at this. Suni leaned over. The wound track, Adah said. Her voice had gone very flat. The flatness of a mind moving faster than it wants to show. Look at the angle. That doesn't match a shot from distance. She indicated the margins of the wound. And look here, there's tissue manipulation. It looks like someone tampered with this wound. Suni was quiet for a moment. Does this mean someone made it worse? She said. Deliberately. Adah met her eyes over the surgical mask. Someone wanted to make sure he didn't survive the trip here. The OR went silent except for the monitors. What do we do with that? Suni asked. Right now, Adah said, turning back. We save his life, then figure out the rest after. She finished the surgery at 3:04 a.m. At the scrub sink, she stood with her hands under the water, stared at the wall for 15 seconds and just breathed. Then she shut off the tap, dried her hands and went to check her patient. Can you assist me with something? Adah asked Suni just before she entered his room. At Suni's nod, she continued. Document every person who asked about the patient. Every name and the time. Then anyone who comes to look for him, call me immediately. You really think they'll come back? Suni asked. Adah didn't slow down. I know they will. The recovery room was dim. 4:17 a.m. Adah sat in the chair beside the bed, writing notes, her pen moving in the tired loops of someone running on coffee and adrenaline. The monitors made their soft, steady sounds. She didn't notice when he opened his eyes. You argued with the director. She stopped writing. His voice was rough and low and barely there, but it was present. Already reassembling itself even now, even flat on his back with tubes in his arm. And the senior doctor, he continued. Then you operated alone. She looked up slowly. Min-jae was watching her. Dark eyes, black hair pushed across his forehead. Pale from blood loss, yes, but his gaze was sharp and measuring in the way of someone who is never quite off. You should be asleep, she said finally. I heard everything. From the bay. Every word. He continued, ignoring her words. You were barely conscious. I don't lose consciousness easily, he said, breathing slowly. It's a habit. She set down her pen. What kind of habit? The kind you build when sleeping too deeply gets you killed. She didn't respond to that. She wasn't sure how to. Why did you do it? He asked. Do what? Save me. He said it quietly, like the question was heavier than the words. You knew who I was. I saw it in your face when they told you. And you still. He stopped. Like he was searching for a framework that didn't exist. You chose to. Adah was quiet for a moment. Outside, the rain had finally softened. The city made its pre-dawn sounds. A distant truck, something dripping, the low hum of the building around them. I was losing this job anyway, she said. He blinked. Whatever he had expected, it wasn't that. 3 weeks' notice, give or take, she continued. I filed a complaint against a senior surgeon. The hospital found a technicality. So I already knew. She met his eyes. If I was going to lose everything anyway, I decided I would lose it doing something I could live with. He was silent for a long moment. That's not what I expected you to say. What did you expect? Something about an oath. Something principled. It was principled, she said. Principles and desperation are not mutually exclusive. Something shifted in his face. The ghost of an expression that didn't have a quick name. Someone deliberately tampered with my wound, right? He asked. Yes. Then whoever arranged this. His jaw tightened just once. They knew I would come here. They counted on my own name being the thing that finished me. He looked at the ceiling. That takes someone who knows me well. Someone close to you? Adah asked carefully. He didn't answer that. But the way his silence landed, heavy and specific, told her she was right. Rest, she said, standing. We'll talk more when you've slept. She was at the door when he said quietly, Dr. Okoye. She turned a little surprised he knew her name. Thank you, he said, just that. No decoration. No performance. She looked at him for a moment. I hope I don't regret it, she said. She meant it as a warning. It landed differently. Even she could feel it. She left. And Kang Min-jae lay in the dim room and stared at the ceiling and thought about the specific kind of person who helps someone without needing anything back from them. He hadn't met many. At 4:49 a.m., a man in an orderly's uniform that didn't quite fit him turned down the corridor toward recovery. He walked with the careful, measured steps of someone trying very hard not to look like what he was. He stopped at the nursing station. "One of the doctors asked me to check on the patient in room 4, he said. The junior nurse looked at him. "Which doctor?" "Dr. Park. We have 3 Dr. Parks on tonight." "Which one?" The man paused a bit too long. The junior nurse reached slowly for the phone. The man turned and walked away, faster than he'd arrived. She watched him go. Then she dialed. "Dr. Okoye?" she said when the line picked up. Her voice was steady but only just. "I think you need to come back now." Adah was back on the floor in 3 minutes. She didn't run. Running created panic, and panic spread through a hospital ward the way smoke spreads through a building, quietly then everywhere at once. She walked fast, her jaw set, her white coat catching the corridor light as she moved. The junior nurse met her at the station. Her hands were trembling slightly. Not enough for a patient to notice, but Adah noticed. "Tell me exactly what you saw and heard," Adah said. He came from the east stairwell, wearing an orderly's uniform, but it was too big across the shoulders. He asked about the patient in room 4. Said a doctor sent him. When I asked which doctor, he said Park. "We have 3 Dr. Parks tonight, so I asked which one and he just..." She paused. He looked at me like he was deciding something. Then he left. "Which direction?" "Back toward the stairwell." "Did he see which room the patient was actually in?" "I don't think so. I didn't confirm anything." "Good." Adah put a hand briefly on her arm. "You did the right thing. Go find security, don't use the intercom, walk there, and describe what you saw. Face build everything. Go now." The nurse left. Adah turned toward recovery. She pushed the door open and Min-jae was already sitting up. Not struggling, not wincing his way upright. Sitting up with the rigid, controlled stillness of a man who had decided that pain was something that happened to other versions of himself. His foreline had pulled taut against his arm. His eyes were already on the door when she entered. "How many?" he asked. "How many what?" She asked, a bit surprised. Then the look on his face told her that he already knew. "It was just one man," she replied. "There's no such thing as one," he said flatly. "You send one person to confirm a location. You send at least 2 more to act on the confirmation. They're already in the building." He looked past her toward the window. His gaze moved the way water moves, finding every possible exit before settling. How long since he was seen? 7 minutes. Maybe 8. Then we're already behind. He reached for the 4 line. "Don't," she said before he could pull it out of his hand. "Dr. Okoye. Listen to me." She stepped forward, kept her voice low and level. "You had abdominal surgery just a few hours ago. If you tear that repair, you will bleed internally, and I cannot help you in a corridor or a stairwell or wherever you think you're going. You will die on the floor of this hospital, and this time there will be nobody to stop it." She held his gaze. "So let me think. 30 seconds. That's all I need." He looked at her. Then he let go of the line. She stood in the middle of the room and thought. The freight elevator at the end of the hall was for equipment delivery. No camera feed on the main security display. Basement loading dock, east alley. No coverage on that side of the building. She'd walked it twice during fire drills. She knew the corners, the timing, the distance to the street. She went to the staff locker room 2 doors down and came back with spare scrubs and a hospital jacket, the kind of anonymous clothing that made people disappear inside medical buildings. She set them on the bed without a word. "Can you walk?" she asked. He was already removing the 4, properly, thumb pressed to the site. She noted this without commenting on it. "Yes," he said. That was unconvincing. "It will have to be enough." She helped him into the jacket. He didn't ask for help and didn't refuse it, which she was suspecting was the closest he came to vulnerability. She could feel the tension in his frame as she adjusted the collar. The way every muscle was braced, managing the pain through sheer refusal to acknowledge it. "We can go through the freight elevator," she said quietly. "End of the hall. Basement to the loading dock. Then east through the alley." He looked at her. Something moved across his face. "You planned this quickly. Emergency medicine. Fast planning is the job." They moved into the corridor. Flat fluorescent light. The overnight silence, thin and brittle. One nurse at the far station with her back turned. Their footsteps were careful, measured, and deliberate. They were 6 steps from the freight elevator when the voices came. From the stairwell door to their right, 2 men talking in low, clipped tones. Adah caught the words before she could stop herself from hearing them. "Room 4 is empty." She moved him. "Then find the doctor." "She's a Nigerian woman, late 20s, braids. She was on shift at midnight." "She's still in the building." A pause. The unmistakable sound of a weapon being checked. The cold moved through Adah's body like something poured. Her name. Her description. They were not only here for Min Jae. "They're looking for me too," she said. "Yes. Because I saved you." "Yes." She laughed. A short involuntary sound with no humor in it. "I did the right thing, and yet there are men with guns at my workplace looking for me." She pressed her fingers to her mouth. Collected herself. She had become a problem the moment she saved him. She pressed herself flat against the wall beside the elevator, her shoulder against Min Jae's arm. He had gone completely still. Not frozen still. The kind of stillness that is itself a form of action. Her heart was hitting her ribs so hard she was briefly certain it was audible. She pressed the elevator button. Kept her finger steady through the effort of keeping it steady. 8 seconds. The doors opened. They stepped in. The doors closed. In the sudden enclosure of the elevator, Adah pressed her back against the wall and exhaled. A long, shaking breath she had been holding without realizing it. The fluorescent strip above them hummed. The elevator descended. She stared at the ceiling. She thought about her apartment. Her cat. The chicken and beef stew still in the pot on the stove. And the white rice she'd planned to boil when she got back from her shift. The shift rota on her fridge that had her scheduled through next Thursday. Her family back in Nigeria she hadn't seen for 2 years now. The quiet, predictable rhythm of her life in this city. The life she had built carefully, deliberately, after everything that had fallen apart before. All of it felt very far away right now. She had looked at a dying man and chosen not to walk away. That choice had made her a target. It had put her name in the mouths of men with guns who were currently moving through her workplace looking for her. It had taken her ordinary Thursday night shift and turned it into something she didn't have a word for yet. He looked at her for a moment with an expression she couldn't fully read, something between recognition and something older than that. To Min Jae, never had anyone willingly put themselves at risk just to save him. Not when more than half the city feared him and the remaining fraction was looking for ways to end his life. The elevator opened onto the basement. The loading dock was cold, and the alley beyond it was dark and smelled like rain and concrete. Adah pushed the heavy dock door and the early morning air came in sharp and immediate. She checked both ends of the alley before stepping out, the way she'd seen done in enough films to know the basics, though the reality of doing it herself felt surreal in a way she didn't have time to process. She couldn't go to her apartment for obvious reasons, so she had no choice but to go with him. Min Jae came through behind her. He was moving with that same controlled, deliberate pace, with each step considered, the pain managed through sheer refusal. She stayed close without making it obvious. They went east. The alley curved. The street lamp at the corner threw orange light coupled with the break of dawn across the wet ground. "For blocks," he said. "There's a building I own under a separate name. No one in the organization has the address. Not Daesung. Not Park. Nobody. You have a secret building." "Yes. Just a building that you own under a different name for situations like this?" "Yes." She processed this while they walked. "How many times have you needed it?" "Twice before tonight," he replied. His breathing was now more audible for walking. "And the other 2 times. I walked away both times, and there were serious repercussions for the perpetrators." He paused. "I had no one else to consider." She glanced at him. He was looking ahead, his jaw tight against the effort of walking, but his words sat between them with a weight he hadn't put there deliberately, which made them heavier. The safe house was on the 4th floor above a dry cleaning business. Narrow stairs. Min Jae took them slowly and Adah stayed a step behind, close enough to matter, far enough that he kept his dignity. She noticed he gripped the railing on the right side, keeping pressure off his left. She noticed and said nothing. Inside, the apartment was plain and prepared. Blackout curtains, canned food, a burner phone still sealed, and on the shelf near the window a small medical kit. Adah looked at it. looked at him. How often does this happen? She asked. Often enough to prepare for it, he said, lowering onto the couch with a slow exhale that he almost managed to make silent. She opened the kit, checked his wound. Sutures intact. No tearing. She rebandaged him with hands that were steadier than they had any right to be. You're lucky, she said. I don't believe in luck. After tonight, you should consider starting. She sat back. Who else knew your movements? Walk me through it, she said. Though there was a slight tremor in her voice, it didn't stop her from asking the question that needed asking. She wasn't about to let fear stop her from planning the next step with the ultimate goal to survive. It was something her mother had always praised her for. Her ability to think through chaos. Min-jae looked at the table. 4 people. My driver dead. Security lead dead at the scene. Director Park. And Lee Dae-sung. He said the last name the way you say something you've been testing the weight of for hours. She noted he had mentioned the last name earlier. You think it's both of them? Dr. Park and this Dae-sung. I've known Park for quite some time now. After an unfortunate incident that occurred with his daughter years ago, I assisted him in whatever way I could, including setting up that hospital for him. I know Park arranged the hospital and he controls and knows the staff. But Park doesn't make moves. He enables them. His voice was even almost clinical and a little breathless. Dae-sung made the move. That must be really. Adah stopped and chose the word carefully. Painful. He was quiet for a moment. When I was 21, a rival crew left me in an alley. Dae-sung found me. He stayed 3 days with me while I recovered, in a place not much better than this. He was 20 and terrified. He paused. But he never showed it. And you never forgot it. No. He's been with me up to the point that he became more of a friend to me than just someone who works for me, Min-jae stated weakly. So you trusted him with everything? Yes, I did. And now, Min-jae said quietly, I'm here. She looked at him. The controlled face. The careful breathing. The grief he was keeping behind a wall because he had probably never learned any other way to keep it, and her heart went out to him. That's not your failure, she said. Trusting someone is not the same as causing their choices. He looked at her. I know what I'm talking about, she added. The first hospital I worked at, a senior colleague stole my research, published it as his own. When I reported it, my department head told me to consider whether I was remembering things correctly. She held his gaze. I blamed myself for 2 years. Were you wrong to trust him? No, she said. I was decent. He wasn't. Those are his failures, not mine. A beat. Yours too. He studied her face. You say things directly. Someone has to. Most people don't. Not to me. Most people, she said, closing the medical kit, are afraid of you. Are you? She thought about the elevator. Her heart against her ribs. Her name in the mouth of a man checking a weapon. Yes, she said honestly. But not of you specifically. He considered that. What then? Of what tonight means, she said. For my life. For what comes next. She looked at her hands. I had a very ordinary life here. I liked it. I worked hard for it. I know. And now. I know, he said again. Softer this time. The room was quiet. Outside, Seoul moved and breathed and paid no attention to any of it. The most baffling thing at this point is the fact that I think I would still do it again, she said, almost to herself. He looked at her for a long moment. I know that too, he said. That's the part one can't stop thinking about. The first sound they heard was glass. Not the shattering kind, the quiet, deliberate kind. The kind that meant someone knew they were there and was trying not to be heard. A single pane on the east-facing window, scored and removed with practiced hands. Adah heard it from the kitchen where she had been standing with a glass of water, trying to remember what sleeping felt like. She went still. They had found them. Then Min-jae's voice came from the couch, low and immediate, with no room in it for anything except instruction. Behind the radiator. East wall. There's a panel. She turned and looked at the east wall. Saw the radiator. Go, he whispered. She crossed the room, knelt behind the radiator and found the panel. A section of wall that gave inward when she pressed it. Behind it, a flat case. She pulled it out, brought it to him, and he opened it with the efficiency of someone who had done it in the dark before. Inside there were 2 loaded handguns, a knife and extra ammunition. He took both guns and held one out to her. She looked at it. "Take it," he said. "Min-jae." "Adah, take it," he said more softly. She took it. The weight of it was wrong in her hands, too heavy and too real. Her fingers found the grip the way fingers find anything unfamiliar, with uncertainty pretending to be purpose. "Go to the back room," he whispered, already moving toward the window, already repositioning himself despite every reason his body had to refuse. "Lock the door. If anyone comes through it, that isn't me." "Stop." She stepped in front of him. Not aggressively. Just there. Solid. "Look at me." He looked at her. "You can barely stand," she said. "I'm not saying that to shame you. I'm saying it because it's true and we both know it. You had surgery hours ago. Your body is running on nothing." She held his gaze. "I know you're trying to protect me, but right now you're not in the right position to do this all by yourself." Min-jae's jaw tightened. "You've been protecting me all day, it's my turn to protect you as well. We have no time, go to the back room and—" "I'm already in this," she said. "I have been since midnight. My name is in their mouths, my face is part of what they're looking for. I don't get to hide in a back room and let you bleed out in the hallway." She lifted the gun slightly. "Show me how to use this." Something moved across his face. Not defeat. Something more complicated than that. It was the particular expression of a man confronting something he hadn't expected to feel. He showed her, quickly and precisely, how to hold it, how to stand, where to put her weight. "Safety off. Both hands. Don't close your eyes. Shoot at anyone who moves toward you," he said. "Don't warn them. Don't hesitate. Just shoot." "I'm a doctor," she said, taking a deep breath. "My entire training is about not doing that. Today I guess you're something else." Their eyes held for 1 second longer than necessary. Then the window came in. It happened fast. 2 men through the east window, 1 through the front door simultaneously. The lock had been worked on from outside, a professional entry, coordinated and timed. The apartment went from silent to violent in the space of a breath. Min-jae moved. Adah would think about it later, how he moved. The injury should have slowed him. It should have stopped him. Instead he operated like a man who had simply decided the pain didn't have a vote, and his body, remarkably, complied. He put himself between her and the first man through the window, and the sound of the first gunshot in the enclosed space hit Adah's chest like a physical blow. She pressed her back against the wall. Her hands were shaking, but the gun was up, both hands the way he had shown her, and she was watching the front door the way he had told her to watch it. The second shot. Third. A crash, furniture, a body, something heavy meeting the floor. Her heart was not beating so much as detonating repeatedly in her chest. The man from the front door came toward her. She fired. The shot went wide, it hit the wall to his left, but it stopped him. 1/2 second of hesitation. That was all. Min-jae was already there. And the fight that followed was brief and brutal. Then it was quiet. The specific quiet that follows violence. Absolute and ringing. The room's silence, trying to recover from what had just happened in it. Adah stood with her back against the wall. The gun still raised. Her breathing coming in short, unsteady pulls. She looked at Min-jae, still upright, a cut on his jaw, his hand pressed to his side, and she knew without checking that the effort of what he'd just done had cost him. "Are you?" she started. "Fine," he said. "You're not fine. I'm standing." That's a very low bar. He almost said something, then he didn't. Instead he crossed to the man on the floor, the only one who was still alive and making sounds, and he crouched down beside him. Not easily. Adah could see the controlled way he lowered himself. Managing the wound with the same stubborn discipline he managed everything. He looked at the man. "Lee Dae-sung," he said quietly. "Where is he?" The man's eyes moved to him. Recognition there, and beneath it, fear. Real deep, specific fear. The kind that comes not from not knowing what someone is capable of, but from knowing exactly. "I don't." "You do," Min-jae said. Still quiet. "You were sent by someone. That someone is either Dae-sung or someone Dae-sung is using. Either answer tells me what I need." He paused. then looked at the man for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "I'm not going to threaten your family." The man looked at Min-jae. Surprise flashed in his eyes despite the state he was in. "I'm not going to threaten anyone," Min-jae said. "I'm going to ask you once. And you're going to tell me because you're dying and you know it, and whatever you believed in when you signed up for this. Ask yourself right now if it was all worth it in the end." He waited a bit. "Dae-sung. Where is he?" Adah looked at Min-jae. At the flatness in his voice. The complete, terrible absence of performance in it. He meant it. The man on the floor heard that same absence. His breathing changed. "Gangnam," he said. Barely audible. "The private space on Dosendero. The whole council is meeting tonight." He coughed. "He's calling it a leadership meeting." Announcing himself. Min-jae held the man's gaze for a moment. Something passed through his expression that was not forgiveness and not the absence of it. Something more complicated. "Thank you," he giggled slightly. Then his eyes closed. His breathing slowed. Adah crossed the room and checked his pulse. Alive but barely conscious, he was heading somewhere that would take time to come back from. "We need to move," Min-jae said. "You need to let me check your wound first." "Adah. 30 seconds. Give me 30 seconds. He stopped. Let her lift the jacket, check the bandaging. The sutures had held, just barely. There was fresh blood at the edge of the wound. Not enough to be catastrophic but enough to matter. "You've reopened the edge," she said, pressing her hand flat against it. "It's not critical but it will be if you keep doing things like..." She gestured at the room, at the general chaos of what had just happened. "This." "Noted," he said. His hand covered hers briefly, pressing it more firmly against the wound. Not deliberately intimate. Purely practical. But her hand was warm under his and neither of them moved for a moment. She looked up. He was already looking at her. "We need to go," he said. Quieter than before. "I know," she said. Neither of them moved immediately. Then she stepped back, retied the bandaging with efficient hands, and picked up the gun from where she'd set it down. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere they won't look for another hour. Then I need to make contact with Shin. Your man. The only one I'm certain of right now." They left through the back stairs. The streets were already beaming with activity. They walked. Closer together than before, the distance between them having renegotiated itself somewhere in the last hour without either of them formally agreeing to it. "You fired," he said. "I missed." "You fired," he said again, as if the distinction was the point. She considered this. "I was terrified." "I know. You did it anyway." "Is that," she glanced at him, "is that something you find impressive? Because I'm a doctor. That is the most violence I have ever been adjacent to in my life, and I would very much like it to be the last time." "I know. You keep saying that. I know. What exactly do you know?" He was quiet for a moment. The gray morning moved around them. "I know this isn't your world," he said. "I know you walked into something last night that you had every reason to walk past. I know that you're still here, still moving, still present, when most people would have dissolved." He paused. "And I know that I don't have the right words for what that means to me." She looked at him. He was looking ahead, his profile cut against the morning sky, the cut on his jaw drying dark. "Are you trying to say thank you?" she asked. "I'm trying to say something larger than that," he said. "I don't have the vocabulary for it yet." She was quiet for a moment. "When this is over," she said, "what do you want?" He looked at her then. And for the first time since she'd met him, since she'd stood over him in an operating room and fought to keep him in the world, he looked like a man who was actually considering a future rather than just surviving toward one. "I don't know," he said. "I haven't asked myself that in a long time." "Then start," she said. "Start asking." They walked. The city continued its activity around them. And somewhere between one block and the next, without announcement, without decision, his hand found hers. Neither of them said anything. Neither of them let go. The council meeting. Second floor. 14 people. Dae-sung at the head of the table, looking older than she'd imagined. Despite Min-jae's refusal, Adah followed him into the building, knowing that she was safer with him and away from him. As soon as Min-jae walked in, the silence was absolute. Daesung didn't move, he didn't look shocked. He looked at Min-jae the way you look at someone you hoped wouldn't come back, not because you hate them but because their return means you have to finish what you started. I didn't think you'd make it, Daesung began. I know, because you planned this carefully, Min-jae said. I planned for the man I thought you still were. A pause. You're different. I've been different for a long time. Neither of us noticed. Oh, I did. I noticed how close you were to giving everything up. Did you think I wouldn't know about your plans to turn legitimate? I'm your right-hand man, for God's sake, Daesung said and looked at the table. Adah looked at Min-jae, slight surprise registering in her face, but she didn't say anything. They came to me 18 months ago. I held them off for 6 months. I kept telling myself you would change and go back to your old ways. Daesung looked up. But you never did. You of all people forgot that no one leaves our world alive. Not even you, the great and most feared Kang Min-jae. For a moment, Min-jae looked at Daesung, his friend of over 10 years, and he knew what he had to do. Fear spread through Adah's body as Daesung stood from his seat, with a gun visible in his hand, and walked towards Min-jae. I'm sorry it came to this, my friend, but it's the way of our life. You can come into it, but you can never leave alive. Good. Before Daesung could finish his statement, a loud sound echoed through the space, and within minutes Daesung collapsed on the floor. Kang Min-jae had shot him. Min-jae stood closer to the head of the table and looked at the council. I'm stepping down, he said confidently. Not for any of you or for negotiation, but because I stopped believing in this years ago and kept going out of habit and pride. He looked at each face. There is only one condition for you all to keep your lives. The doctor who saved my life is untouchable. Not a target. Not leverage. Not a message. He paused. If anything happens to her, anything, I will consider it a decision. Are we clear? One by one they confirmed it. Without another word, he held Adah's hand and walked out. 6 months later, the Harang Clinic opened in Busan. Small. A converted shopfront near the sea. Open 6 days a week. Adah named it. Min-jae, who signed his paperwork as Jaemin Kim now, had the sign made without discussion. She treated patients. He managed the building, argued with suppliers, fixed things that broke. They existed in the same space with the ease of two people who had stopped needing to explain themselves to each other. One evening she was locking up and found him in the back room. He was sitting at a small table with a notebook open, writing something in careful, deliberate strokes. She recognized it after a moment. Sheet music. He had been learning composition. Alone. For years. He had never told anyone. She stood in the doorway. He looked up. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. You never mentioned that, she said finally. Nobody asked. I'm asking now. He looked at the notebook. I started when I was 26. I needed something that was only mine. Something that had nothing to do with all of it. He paused. I never finished anything. I would get close and then something would happen and I would. He stopped. You would put it away, she said. Yes. She sat down across from him. Play me something. There's no instrument here. Then sing it. He looked at her. The expression on his face was the most unguarded thing she had ever seen on it. More unguarded than the operating room. More unguarded than the safe house. More than any moment across everything they had been through. No, he said. But it sounded like not yet. She nodded, looked at the notebook and looked at him. Finish it, she said. Whatever you've been not finishing. Finish it. He looked at her for a long moment. Outside, the sea made its sounds. The city of Busan moved and breathed in the early evening. In the clinic, one lamp on, sheet music open on the table between them, two people sat with the specific quiet of those who have stopped performing themselves for each other. Here is the question for you. If doing the right thing costs you everything you built, everything you planned, everything you thought your life was going to be, will it still be worth it? Don't answer that too quickly. If you enjoyed this story, like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so you will be the first to know when new stories like this and even more are released. See you in the comments section.